With modern filmmaking, it's not hard to come across productions utilising many visual effects, all the way from camera trickery to digital composited renders. But stopping to take a look, how much do the visuals matter? To start off, we need to go back to the early days of visual effects, to one of its industry's pioneers, Georges Méliès. Méliès was an illusionist from France who saw the invention of the cinematograph, a precursor to our modern-day film cameras, as a way to extend his use of illusionism. Méliès's first notable use of the technology was double exposure. This was a technique whereby if filmed against a blank colour, film could be re-exposed again with a separate image. Méliès used this to his advantage with his short film, The Man with the Rubber Head. In this film, Méliès used double exposure to duplicate his own head and conduct experiments on it, altering its size. The film was considered groundbreaking for the time and allowed Méliès to advance his skills in this area. It allowed him such that during the following year, Méliès had worked on arguably his most famous creation, A Trip to the Moon. This saw Méliès use many techniques, including double exposure and even matte paintings, to create what was arguably the first science fiction film. Now, let's talk about this. For the film to work successfully, the project was heavily reliant on the effects being convincing for the audience, in order to drive the narrative. This was fortunately the case. However, this is a sentiment which has stayed in filmmaking until the modern day. Modern-day visual effects, by and large, rely on immersion to sell their success, trying to tell a story that's greater than what can be captured physically in camera. Due to VFX in modern productions being relatively commoditised, however, spectacle, namely in the visual effects area, have faced scrutiny, especially when looking at digital compositing. I spoke to digital effects artist Mark Jackson to get his opinion on the growing market of VFX in filmmaking.
I think I'm trying to think of, what really started me getting interested in visual effects, and I always think of like the original Jurassic Park movie. I think I saw that like in cinema when I was like 10, and it was just so amazing to me at the time, and even still now, like I still go back and watch that movie and look at some of those shots and think of the technology that they had then to like do those shots, and how well integrated like the dinosaurs and things like that are into the shots, and how much character they give them, and for me, like that makes that movie like a lot better, because I think if you're taken away from like the story you're trying to tell by bad visual effects, that's always going to be like a negative.
Distracting visual effects can have negative impacts on production for the audience and can break immersion in viewing. A recent example that has been prominent during the last 5 years in film is that of the uncanny valley. This is a term used to describe the way that humans perceive similarity to human facial features. Notably, this has become an issue when recreating digitally rendered characters on screen. The valley dictates that the closer the subject gets to a human face, the more scrutiny it receives. Implementing digital humans, such as Tarkin, recreated from Peter Cushing from Rogue One in 2016, has been a criticism of visual effects mainly serving as a distracting element from the story rather than adding to it. This is a sentiment shared by Guy Debord on his Society of the Spectacle. This stated that the spectacle is a social relation between people that is mediated by an accumulation of images that serve to alienate us from a genuinely lived life. Essentially what this means is that visuals largely serve viewers as a distraction from the narrative at play, rather than serving the story. Spectacle, however, is not just a distraction. It serves as a storytelling device and has done way before cinema. Visual storytelling is nothing new, and within cinema, largely serves as a way to convey tone to audiences without explicit dialogue doing so. One production which executes on this premise well is WandaVision. This show mainly relies on spectacle to drive its tone in its pilot, The Giver. This episode is largely based off 1950s and early 1960s sitcoms such as I Love Lucy and Bewitched. The use of similar cinematography, namely being shot with a multi-camera setup and a lack of depth on an open stage, allows the audience to pull on similar tones created by other shows, as mentioned before. This in turn allows the cinematography to have a tonal identity. This is used to the production's advantage and becomes prominent when the show takes a turn in the later half of the episode to build tension. It does this by changing the cinematography instantly, altering it to a more depth-heavy and close-up centric setup, instantly changing the tone without altering dialogue necessarily. This can be compared to Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, or even Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. Spectacle has different impacts on different sectors of production too. Namely, in short-form media, spectacle is something which has to be more prominent to engage users, namely in advertising and marketing. This is something that is heavily utilised by brands. If we look at it, spectacle is something that is integral to film, giving the audience a sense of identifiability and uniqueness about the production that they are watching. Each director has their own style and their own way of marking their own work. And as mentioned, in certain places can serve as a distraction. However, using spectacle to one's advantage can prove extremely beneficial to a production through the use of visual storytelling.